All right, we're live. I got Daniel Hooker here with me, one of the Kiwis. I'd say OGs, but there's no one older than Carl over there, so I don't want to say that and show him any disrespect in case he gets annoyed with me.
Yeah. Our OG's a bit long in the tooth now,
Yeah, yeah, we're getting there. I can't grow hair on top anymore, but
huh?
it's been super fun watching you guys kind of like knuckle it out and stay the course too, because it's a tough sport where it's really tough to keep doing it for as long as you've done it. How old are you now, Dan?
I'm 30 at the moment, but yeah, you're pretty bang on with that. I think it was just harder with like the generation we're from, that there was no one that had done it, especially from New Zealand. That no one had even competed in the UFC. So to be part of that kind of first generation, to turn it from the backstages to the now in UFC and like a global stage is I'm pretty appreciative to be part of that generation.
Yeah, man, it's super good. So I love a good origin story. So why don't you just let everyone know real quick what actually got you into martial arts at the beginning?
Well, I actually, a friend of mine, Steve Warby, was, we all used to look up to him at the time, and I think I was 17, just turning 18, and he was a bit older than that, and I went and watched him have his first MMA fight. So I just kind of followed along there to watch his first MMA fight, and he knocked his opponent out in about 10, 20 seconds, and I just felt that that's the first fight show I'd ever been to in my life. And I just felt that energy of the crowd, and I feel everyone, yelling and screaming, get carried away. And so that was my first experience of an MMA show, and I was just like, man, I want that feeling. So when I first walked into a gym, it wasn't like, oh, I'm gonna dabble in this and see how it goes. The, I walked into the gym like, okay, I want to knock someone out and make a crowd get excited about it. Like if someone would walk into my gym today and say that same thing I would think they were a complete idiot. But that's. I definitely feel like it helped my like speed up my progress in the sport, just because I wanted to compete as soon as I kind of walked into the gym. So it definitely sped that up a bit. But I was hooked from then. I followed my friend Steve to the gym that following week, and after my first session, I was just kind of like, this is what I'm doing now. This is what I'm doing with the rest of my life.
It's funny how it kind of gets into your blood and then sinks it in, because I know that's something that I've done every year. It's like, how do I keep doing that this year? How do I keep doing that this year? And it wasn't really until I started like spending more time in the hospital than on the mats that I was kind of like, okay, maybe it's time to be coach bone for a bit,
Yeah,
but I'm
yeah.
gonna keep doing this thing. Like it's in my blood. It's what I'm meant to be doing. And like, even though it's like tough to keep up with everyone still, like I wouldn't prefer to be anywhere else than rocking up to the gym every day and play fighting with my mates.
Yeah, well, that was actually when I completely committed to this. Like I was obviously training. I decided like I love the sport. I love to train. I love to learn, and that kind of had me hooked. But I made a full commitment to the sport. I think I was 3-3 as a professional. Just got my ass whooped, and I was like unsure about carrying on. And I tried to pack it in. I tried to give it up, and I was like, yeah, like I'm obviously not going to make this. I do suck. I got an even record. Like I'm going to walk away. I'm going to pack it in, and I think I could. I packed it in for like 2-3 days, and I tried to get a real job, and I was terrible, and I hated it. Actually, did like a door to door sales with my friend, and it was like the first door I knocked on, and the guy was like kind of rude, and I was like, yeah, my old job's way better than this. I was like, I want to punch this guy. I need a job where I can actually punch this guy. But that was me. 3-3, even record as a pro, and I was like, regardless of success or failure, this is what I want to do. This is what I want. I could be 3-100, but I want to fully commit to the sport. So I didn't commit to the sport when I was, undefeated or flying high or on winning champions. I committed to it when I was one of the lowest stages of my career, I could say.
Yeah, which is an important lesson for all the young guys. And I mean, you're a coach now, so your young guys are going to love listening to that. That at 3-3, there's still hope, you know. And my good friend Damien has a good story about that too. You know, like he lost 3 on the trot as well, and came back and fought in Australia, and then went and got overseas contracts again in the UFC and now in Ryzen. So that's a really important lesson for the young guys to learn, that like just because you don't get that UFC shot at the beginning, or just because you maybe fail overseas the first time, you can come back and go and do it again, especially if you're under 40 years old. You got time.
Yeah, you definitely have time. It's just part of the sport. You know, you get into the sport, and I'm thinking, won my first fight, and I was like, yeah, I'm the next Anderson Silva. Lose the one after that, and you're just like, all right, the direction has changed a little bit. You know, win one, lose one, win one, lose. Like, it's just early on. Like I tell my younger guys, like those first 5 fights, 10 fights, like regardless of what happens, you could lose all of those. It's valuable experience. Like I don't care about that. The lessons you're going to learn in those first 5 amateur fights, 10 amateur fights, they're going to repeat themselves. You're going to have to learn them at some stage. They're going to repeat themselves throughout your career. So I'd better to learn it early on than to win a bunch of padded fights against guys you're better than and then get into tough competition. Like I couldn't care less. I couldn't care less what happens in your first 5 fights, as long as you're learning those lessons and you know, picking yourself back up after a failure is one of the biggest lessons that any fighter could learn. You can look at like people like to talk about, let's say Floyd Mayweather or Khabib being undefeated, but go back and watch how Floyd reacts to losing the gold medal at the Olympics. Go back and watch Khabib losing a amateur sambo competition. Like they literally break down. Like both of these guys have had that feeling before. They've had that feeling of defeat, and they tasted it, and they hate that taste, and they never wanted it to repeat itself in their professional career. That's why they're so driven and so focused.
What's your one tip for someone? Let's say they're on a losing streak or just lost a fight that they didn't think they deserved to lose. What's your tip for them for bouncing back?
Yeah, well, for me, it's just been like being real honest with myself. I'm lucky that I can be like very practical about it. Like don't blame anyone else for it. Don't be like, oh well, if this would have happened, if this would have happened. Like just sit down and take responsibility for it yourself. Like as soon as you take responsibility for it yourself, you can, because only you, that's the only thing you can control is you. You know, you can't control the team around you. You can't control, my sparring partners were away this camp, or my coach was sick for the last. You can't control any of that. You can only control the amount of effort that you're putting into your training and into your preparation for a fight. So just have an honest reflection and accept the responsibility for that failure. And it's just the fastest way that you can move forward with it.
Man, I freaking love that. It's really good advice, because I have a rule that I don't like no excuses. I don't even care if we're on the end of a bad decision. It's like, if you're on the end of a bad decision, you should have figured out a way to win the decision and win over the judges. You didn't do enough. You know, like, it's bullshit. There's no point complaining. Mm-hmm. What could we have done to win? And it's really important. And then you mentioned another really great point, where it's like, you can't complain about your team, which brings us back to something that we've all heard you say before, is that the rising tide raises all ships. You need to go back and make your team stronger, you know, like, instead of trying to jump from team to team and looking for excuses. So that's some really, really good points. And you own your own center in Auckland now, correct?
Yeah. It's the Combat Academy.
The Combat Academy. So how often are you in there coaching at the moment, and how have you found the transition to being a coach?
Yeah, well, I'm there every day at some part of the day. I teach 4 nights there, and I've kind of I have a good balance between my own training and my coaching at my own academy. But coaching is something that I got into pretty early on. Like even after I started, if the coach was away after the first 6 months, like he would get me to just teach something or show something. And I found very early on that it helped improve my game so much because learning something and knowing something is one thing, but being able to explain it and teach it to someone else is the depth of understanding that comes from being able to show something is incomparable. So I like to tell my younger guys when they're in the gym, like, you see something wrong, you can correct your partner, correct the guys you see, like you're watching, because it's going to help you understand it. You see their mistakes, you see how to correct it, and then you notice the mistakes within your own game.
Yeah, you got to build that communication. It's part of a successful culture. And I have walked into gyms in the past where the coach actually said, no one's allowed to coach but me. But I personally think that's a bullshit culture. Like, you really need to, people should start parroting what Dan says at training and be like, Dan told me, he said keep our hands up, so we're going to keep our hands up. So I think it's real important that that teams do that with each other as well. Now, you do have a place, Combat Academy in Auckland. If people are thinking about joining up for that academy but they're scared, what's your advice to people who want to try mixed martial arts, jiu-jitsu, Thai boxing or boxing, combat sports, and how they overcome that fear and take that first step?
Yeah, it's funny. Like just showing up to the gym is one of the hardest things you can do. Like, I was in the same boat when I first started. I was so nervous to go to the gym, and I walk in there and I'm thinking, is someone just gonna punch me in the side of the head when I step in the gym? Like, something's gonna happen. But there's really nothing to be stressed about. But I think for young fighters today, compared with when we started, now guys, they see the Conor McGregors, they see that the champions of today, they see the Khabib, and they're just like, oh, I want to be like that. I want to be like that. And then they walk in a gym for the first time and they're just like, holy shit. Like, from me getting from where I am now to that stage is going to take a lifetime. Like, I'm going to have to dedicate my life to this. So you have to have a goal that's attainable. So when you first walk in a gym, like, oh, I just want to lose 5 kilos, or I just want to have one amateur MMA fight. And there's like a slow progression from then. I try to say that every time you turn up to training, you get just a small piece of the puzzle. You get a small piece of the puzzle every time. And if you're consistent enough and you keep showing up, it'll start developing into a picture. But the biggest mistake that I see from, young, hungry, keen guys that are all full of piss and vinegar is they show up and they want the whole picture at one go. They just show up to training and they're just like, give me everything, explain everything to me at once. There's just not how it works. You get one small piece and you start building your own picture.
Yeah, and there's a layering of stuff too, right? Like, I tell people, it's like, you got to be burnt in the fire first before you get to break all those rules. I like particular rules about people holding their hands on their head and having a real tight guard. And then you might be watching the UFC on the weekend and Dan's bouncing around with his hands down, and they're like, that's not how Dan Hooker does it. And I'm like, well, there was a point in time where Dan Hooker did hold his hands on his head, and then we could see everything and manage the distance a little bit better. All those things, all those skills start to layer a little bit. Like, I remember.
Yeah, you gotta know the rules to break the rules.
Yeah, which is like, it's like one of those magic Miyagi moments when your coach says that, and you're like, what the fuck does it mean?
He's speaking in code, and you're just like, he's probably said it 10,000 times this week. He doesn't want
to. Absolutely. So what's next? Let's talk about Dan Hooker, the fighter, instead of the coach, for a second. What's next? What's in the pipeline? Let us all know.
Yeah, well, they've. I'm still in talks with the UFC about the fight with Dustin Poirier. That was the one that I had scheduled before all of this coronavirus went down and all the lockdowns and things. So that fight has been getting dangled in front of me for a long time, but it's been good because it's helped me keep motivated throughout all throughout lockdown. Like I see a lot of fighters kind of just took some time off and let their body rest, which is fine. But I tried to stay as fit as possible, and really what it is I've been able to stay like mentally focused. Like mentally, to me, fight with Dustin Poirier is 100% on the cards, and that's the way that I mentally approach it. There's what's going on, contract negotiations, visa, lockdowns, inability to train. Like all of these things are what is actually going on. But my mentality towards it can't be that, because this is not a sport that you can go 1 foot in the door, 1 foot out the door. You have to be all in to have any kind of success at the sport. So my mentality has been all in terms of the Dustin Poirier fight. So should be getting that all sealed off, and I get the big green tick from Donald Trump letting me in the US, and then we're away.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. And I mean that's an important lesson there too, right? I mean, you're 30 years old, you got to make hay while the sun shines, and you got to stay on task and on purpose. The minute people fall off their purpose, not only do you get depression and all these other stupid things fucking going on, but you're not staying true to yourself. So that's a good lesson for young guys. And also,
I can
take opportunities, right?
I can live with something outside of my control being the reason that I don't get the fight. Like if my visa gets denied and I'm not allowed in the country, or like something outside of my control. But if it came down to it and they were like, we're going to fly you out tomorrow, you got to get on a plane and you got to fight Dustin Poirier next weekend or this weekend, I don't want it to be, I can't live with the fact that me not being prepared is the reason that I didn't get the fight, or I didn't get that opportunity, or I missed out on progressing my career. So if it's outside of my control, that's something I can live with. But me letting myself down is, I don't want that to be the reason.
Yeah, I personally think that's a great fight for you as well. I think that matches well for you, and I'll be surprised. I actually think that you guys have been the underdogs all the time, which is interesting. The numbers are still making you the underdog all the time, and it's like, man, I think people are going to eventually stop thinking that way about Kiwis and Australians all the time. And definitely, it's been great seeing yourself, Rob, and all the city kickboxing guys as well kicking ass. Alex, and also coming together like a Trans-Tasman Anzac thing going, which is amazing that everybody's working together, because that's something that we always talked about in the past too, is trying to create relationships of people working with each other to get to that international level. And it's funny that it's working, like people talked about it, and then as soon as they committed to it, it's really working. What part do you think international camps like Thailand have played in bringing those people together? Do you think that's been a big factor?
I feel like it had its necessary time, like throughout the development, just purely because the expense of living is so cheap in those countries, or it was so cheap in Thailand, that it was a place where everyone could kind of go. It's funny that like coaches will let their fighter go and train in Thailand, but they won't let them go and spar another fighter on the other side of town, but they can go to Thailand. So that's, I feel like, has something to do with it that caused it. But I would say the lifestyle of a fighter wasn't justifiable in New Zealand. Like if you say, oh, you know what, I'm going to take the next 6 months off work and see how my professional MMA career plays out. Like that in the past 5 years ago I don't feel like was acceptable in New Zealand. Like you would have to, it would be very hard to justify that. But when I can move to Thailand and train over there for a period of time, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, I feel like I could cover the living expenses and it was justifiable. But I think now, due to the success, and there are guys like Israel, that are successful, myself, Alex, like there's guys that are justifying making a living from this sport, that it's kind of changed the perception of being a professional martial artist, and it's now a far more mainstream avenue for a sportsman. Speaking from New Zealand.
Yeah, 100%. And it is like almost a form of decentralized training that actually GSP talked about years and years ago, how he would fly to train with experts and do this, that, and everything else, and bring everything back to his home team still. So I think people maybe will learn to do that a little bit better. And obviously, it's a difficult thing for old tribal martial arts coaches to kind of like sink in that it's a good idea to spar the guys down the road. It's also a good idea that there's a boxing coach just down the road that's really good, that might be able to do some hand pads, and you're going to tie in everything for them. So it's a difficult thing for coaches and athletes, and there's also the right time to do it. Like, people have to go through the fire first, build the skills, invest in their team before they start gym hopping. Think that's going to be the way to get really good. What would be your advice to somebody who feels like they've plateaued and they might be fighting amateur or professional in Australia and New Zealand, and how to break that plateau?
Yeah, like that is funny, because there is definitely like a balance of acquiring new skill and then drilling your fundamentals with your coach, and establishing a team and having people that you trust and support you around you to give you their skills. I like to say, because I have fighters come from other gyms and they want to just, okay, I'm here now, let's go and fight. I want to fight as soon as possible. And I try to explain, especially guys coming to City, like, City Kickboxing gets a lot of people coming through its doors, like international fighters coming over and just showing up and being like, all right, I got to fight in 6 months. Like, what can we do? It's like, you can't lick the walls and get the magic CKB skill. Like, I try to tell my fighters, especially, working with a new coach is like learning a new language. If you show up to my gym and then we have a fight next week, I can stand in the corner and I can cheerlead pretty much. But it'll be like someone standing in my corner and yelling at me in Chinese. It's not going to translate. I'm not going to understand it. You need to spend time in an academy. You need to spend time with a coach so you understand the same cause. When he says something, you know exactly what he means. Circle right and set this shot up. You know exactly what to do. But otherwise than that, if you just show up to a new camp for every fight, they're essentially a cheerleader in your corner as opposed to a coach that you trust and can understand.
Yeah, 100%. Big part of it, and the big part of that is just absorbing the attitude of the culture as well. I don't think people understand actually how important attitude is for those things as well. Like, a lot of those fighters that I find that are stuck and having a bad trot, they're really their own worst enemy. No one's going to fix that, and they're just taking their baggage wherever they're going anyway, which is interesting. Dan, I really love that today. I think there's a ton of gold in there. I'm trying to keep these things under half hour so people can watch them in their lunch breaks. I'm no Joe Hogan anyway, so so I really appreciate it, man. Whenever you get on the seminar tour, when they open the borders, I'd really love to have you in Townsville. I think it would be super fun, and the guys would get some value out of it. So have a look at doing that somewhere in between beating everyone up, doing a nice seminar tour, because we would definitely
would love to
throw our hands up. It would be super fun.
Beautiful. Can't wait.
Thanks, brother.
Cheers,
I'm just
mate.
going to end
Thank you.